Okay.
Yeah, hi, Sam and Anna. Nice to see you on the screen again. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the fact that we are neighbors, but also, of course, about what you do and what you have did for Die Balkone that we organize in Prenzlauer Berg. And also the fact, actually, that as also some other couples in our project, this situation of exhibiting something in your own windows or outside the windows or on the balconies made people who usually don't work together. So somehow the domestic sphere influenced also how the pieces were produced. So, and actually in your case was a bit special because you were the only people who really went out of your doorstep. Yes. So there was no a threshold, but like you crossed over, you did things just outside the door. And also you were the only people who did like a Sunday piece and a Monday piece. So there was also a dramaturgy. Plus it's maybe the most difficult work to document because actually it's dealt with the smell and also with the sound. So
exactly,
it would be so great to hear from you actually what was this dramaturgy, what happened on Sunday and what happened on Monday and how.
Well, it was the first time actually that we collaborated on something, and maybe we had maybe too many ideas, so we just thought, why not do two different things, because there were two very different things that both interested us. So the first piece we did on Sunday was just a smell or a series of smells, and we were doing some research about the plague and how during the plague people really believed that the vapors, the airs, were what transmitted the disease, and that one had to purify the airs. So actually doctors had these amazing costumes where the mask had this massive nose that was filled with the scent of oranges, cloves, and cinnamon. So there's sort of oils and essences that are thought to be antiviral. So we sort of used this also as an excuse to do a little bit of spring cleaning, and so we cleaned all our windows and the sidewalk and packed the windows with the smell.
Yeah, because I guess during the plague, it was recommended that you coat your doors and windows with the scents to protect your house.
So it doesn't come in.
So you don't get infected, yeah.
So as if the air doesn't pass through the smell? Like an invisible curtain of sorts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, also just like a kind of an in-between question, maybe you can just like expand on with your answer. How was it also to produce the work in the domestic space? Did it really like also change the production experience in this way?
Yeah, because we kind of got to keep it. You know, we woke up in the morning and opened all the windows and cleaned the windows and the window seals, and the house smelled amazing.
And the street.
Yeah.
The street also, yeah. So it was kind of a, I mean, for passersby, I think it was just a gesture of something sweet smelling, in a difficult situation, and I don't think too many people knew the history of these smells in relation to the plague. So it was a kind of abstraction in a way of the situation.
And you would smell it actually depending on the wind. Sometimes you would smell it right in front of the house, sometimes a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Our daughter observed that there was a person going by on her bike, and apparently she was flaring her nostrils as she passed by. So we took that as a compliment.
Yes, for sure.
But it also was interesting somehow it was also a way of making the facade, making the pavement tasteful in some sense. And this makes me think also about another work of yours, Anna. You actually present yourself when you go on your website, you see yourself leaking the facade of a museum, right? And this something, yeah, okay, leaking the facade. But then I thought, actually, as a child, we all remember, I guess,
Doing
what
something
it
like
was
that, yeah.
to leak, you know, to leak the door, to leak the handle, right? We still have this mineral kind of sensation on our tongues. And I guess, yeah, there was something about smelling and leaking also providing from the piece.
And the therapeutic effects
Yes.
of you know, smelling and licking, and also the
No, it also these gestures also in a way kind of reminded me this very beautiful video statement of the autist activist Mel Baggs, who also passed recently during the COVID-19. But I mean, I think there was a whole collapse in their body because it was Amanda, then Mel Baggs. And this is this really beautiful video that they made called In My Language. And basically in this video that they are talking about the different way of communicating and understanding and relating with the world, which is in autism very different than you know than other than, like, let's say, considered normal human beings. So they were like kind of questioning that how actually we are always like kind of capitalizing, we always believe there is only one way of accepted relationship or perception of the world, and all of these kind of gestures are actually very much connected to another vision that is also possible, and there are many ways to be able to do that.
It's very interesting talking about autism and smells. There was this really incredible research that was done on autistic children whose parents made love the night before, obviously not in front of the child, but they found that the child was much more affectionate after the smell of pheromones permeated the house. So now the pharmaceutical industry is trying to develop, you know, drugs that smell like pheromones.
So I think like the issue of corporeality, I mean, which I also see, maybe you say that you don't generally collaborate together, but there is an element of corporeality, I think, in both of your practices, which I think with these gestures became very clear, and the corporeality also becoming like sometimes a protecting ghost, or sometimes like that questioning phantom, or but it's somehow always like they're showing another layer. Corporeality then becomes a way to layer the world and like show that particular layer and change our maybe relationship with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this also engaging the senses other than the visual is something that, I mean, I don't do so much anymore, but I used to do a lot of work with sound and music and things. And
smell, you did that smell of
done a
of
few
history.
things with scents as well. So yeah, it was also in a way for me like revisiting of modes of working and different ways of engaging senses, because obviously the sense of smell and hearing sound are very powerful, and they reach into your unconscious in a way. It's very hard to sort of protect yourself from the sense of smell and the sense of sound. They immediately create an emotional reaction, so they can be very strong.
But they can also be sneaky.
Yeah, well, you don't notice. When you're looking at things, we're much more visually oriented, so we can create a distance to the thing that we're looking at much more easily than we can when we hear or when we smell. Yeah.
I mean, we can say also like that. I mean, these sort of scent and smell is also like generated one of the biggest pieces of literature in the world, no? Like by Marcel Proust. So then it kind of comes with this memory, and like that memory of that smell, and then sound, and then it kind of whole builds into this 16 books masterpiece in a way. But there's a lot to say.
Yeah, but speaking of sound and another chapter, so how was the Monday piece then in terms of sound?
On Monday we installed a series of metronomes, tick tock, to keep the beat, along a row of trees across the street from our apartment building, and set them to a
60.
Yeah, roughly the average sort of heartbeat, which is 58, 59, 60 beats per minute, and set them all asynchronous, so they were all tick-tocking at different rates. It wasn't that there was a sense of change as you walk down the street, hearing different tick-tocks, different on different sort of
settings. It actually sounded a little bit like galloping, like a horse galloping at a very
like a walking pace or a running pace, and that it also related to like serial music, minimalist music like Steve Reich and Philip Glass, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think Anna's done a lot of work with music throughout her whole career. I mean, she was trained as a musician when she was a young girl in Yugoslavia.
I hate metronomes.
Because they order, no? It's like tack, 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 tack.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also because of the 60 beats per minute, it all, I think it connected with people again in a kind of deep unconscious way.
Yes.
And many people were fascinated by it. I think it was an interesting experience as people were riding their bikes by, or jogging, or walking by.
And they were really high up, so you wouldn't really see them unless you looked up in the tree.
Yeah, that's true.
I should say that we installed it. Well, Sam climbed the ladder, and I passed him the metronome. So it was not like a simple installation. It wasn't super complicated, but you needed a ladder, because there were no branches. So they're kind of the trees that are about 2 meters up, and then you have a branch.
Well, I think, and I think also the sound related to our current moment of quarantine and waiting. We're all sort of waiting. And so it had this effect of time.
Waiting and listening.
Time passing or not passing. And of course, maybe in relation to the idea of nature and climate and things like that. Yeah.
And also, I think we spoke about this, that there is, in the metronome, there is this idea of practicing something. And now when we were all in the domestic sphere, maybe even some people actually practice more instruments or practice yoga, or there was this how to cultivate yourself while you are closed within the confinement.
I think it is also when the time collapses, when our sense of time collapses, basically, because it's maybe the first time in a way that, the everyday, somehow we let the everyday rhythm take over and define our day. And when that everyday completely kind of changes or collapses, and I think everybody experiences really different things, but this collapsing sense of time and trying to regulate it through different means. And I think exercise is also one thing. And I think metronome is also another thing, like trying to find a balance again in that expansion where it's out of also measurement in a way.
And I think measurement and counting are also such for many people, I think they're tools for anxiety. Like I have a friend who counts windows when she's anxious. So I really liked also how the measurement of the sound worked with the actual architecture or urban planning of our street, because the spaces between the trees are very, very equal. So there was this kind of rhythm to walking down the street that was enhanced and disturbed at the same time.
And actually, it was too disturbing for some people. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, shortly before the end of the exhibition, a man who lived on the street just had enough. He couldn't take the sound anymore. And he climbed up all the trees, all 10 trees, and ripped the metronomes down and smashed them. And and unfortunately I didn't see him do it. I wasn't able to sort of record his action, his counter revolutionary moment.
Counter
public.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get video of him in action, unfortunately, but I did talk to him. He did come up and introduce himself and explain to me that it was too much for him. He was going crazy after 6 weeks in quarantine, and that, it wasn't a good, he couldn't take it.
He said, "I'm a man, I have to act." And on the subject of testosterone, like, I have to say that I'm really in awe of the energy and the force behind his action, because he didn't use a ladder. He actually physically climbed up a trunk of a tree, 10 of them. I don't know how he did it either.
He's in very good shape. I guess he was working out a lot during quarantine. I mean,
maybe he also took it as part of his daily exercise, that kind of climbing up and getting it down.
Yeah, I mean, he was there with his daughter, his teenage daughter, who was kind of standing to the side, looking very embarrassed,
but also laughing a little bit.
Laughing a little bit, yeah. I tried to convince him to do an interview and talk about it, but he didn't want to do that. But I mean, I think it just shows the incredible emotional impact of, as I was saying before, of sound. I think because you can't, in a way, you can't protect yourself from it. So he lost it.
Yeah. It seems so. It would be very memorable. Like, we all have our imagination around him now with your description, that I'm imagining his steps, how he climbs. I never see him, but I have him in my mind in a way, Yeah,
there's something really sort of touching and funny and sad about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's very much about the moment of being.
I missed that.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's I'm waiting. I was about to make a remark, but please continue. I can do it afterwards.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking the whole situation was very much about the moment of the the experiences and the impact that this quarantine is having on us, and the sort of relationship between art and life. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very, I think in a way a very successful work in that sense, that it really, I don't know, it brought up the really powerful things about our current moment.
That's true. And also another thing that is also, I think, very powerful for both of us, we were joking, when we were experiencing the piece, the sound piece, that this feels like Skulpturprojektet Prens Lauerberg. Which we were, of course, kind of referring to previous experience of seeing such gestures only, let's say, in the framework of a very large scale exhibition, a huge production, taking a lot of time and taking kind of a big relation, developing and constructing the piece in relation with the Münster city. And then there it was, it was this very solid gesture, and it didn't have all of this production framework around it, and it was standing very powerfully, or it was kind of embracing the space also in a very powerful way, which also says, I think, a lot about our experience of public art practices, or art in public sphere practices, that we always need to connect with a much more, let's say, kind of a bigger institutional framework, and to have it like outside of it is also a very it was a very freeing thing in a way.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I guess, was it a liberating experience in some sense for you? Because for us, it was very much somehow this very spontaneous snowball effect, you know, writing to some people, to our colleagues, artists, some people we didn't know, and having such a quick reactions. It's kind of was
very generous reactions.
liberating.
Yeah.
I really liked, actually, because we haven't been in Berlin that long.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it was also like a wonderful way, for example, for us to meet more, and, you know, so it was sort of like nice that actually there were all these new encounters that were generated by the
becoming neighbors also in some sense. Becoming neighbors. And actually, speaking of neighborhood, we were also curious because you have lived in Serbia, right, in Singapore, in US, and probably other places.
Singapore.
And now in East Berlin, former East Berlin. So is there anything, speaking of relation between like your own home and the outside and your neighbors, that really changes here from your previous experience? Is there something you could share?
Well, I think it's different everywhere, but I think it's really one of those things that it has to do with climate. And the way that the balconies work, I think, with climate. We were talking about how, like, for example, in Romania, I remember my grandmother using her balcony as a fridge because the electricity was constantly being cut. So it sort of became this way of preserving food, you know. And I was actually reading something about sort of different kind, like the different kinds of surveillance in communism, and how that worked so much better in Cuba because you had the tropical surveillance, because you don't close your balcony, you don't close your windows, so it's actually much easier to hear what people are up to.
It's porous. It's porous.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting here. You really see how people. It's either the winter garden or it's sort of the beach, you know. So the balcony has this kind of dual use, which I think is really very specific to Berlin.
Yes, for sure. This is also two questions. Maybe they're also connected to each other. We would be very curious, like, how did you decide to come to the Prenzlauer Berg neighborhood? Was it more like about the house, about your search? Because you also said it's very recent, actually, that you moved to Berlin. And of course, we'll be curious about, in relation with your grandma using the balcony as a fridge, the image, the first maybe strong memory of a balcony in your life. It can be the image, the sound again, or it can be the smell, I don't know.
Well, we moved to Berlin almost 2 years ago now in August. And it had to do like with the strategic issue of where our child goes to school, how to get there fastest.
Yeah, being in the center of the city, close to everything, so we can, you know, it's about mobility, you know, and I think
trading for the apartment too.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a series, you know, a kind of it seemed like a very safe and nice place to live. That a lot of artists' friends were there, so yeah, it made sense. I mean, for me, the balcony, I think it's really connected to the summer, and you know, growing up in Boston, we didn't use our balconies, of course, in the winter like here, you know. So it's very much about coming out of your house and connecting with friends and neighbors, and maybe having barbecue. Yeah, I guess it's about kind of reconnecting with others.
I have to say, my parents have a tiny, tiny balcony in Singapore, because I've been thinking actually that it's kind of also a transitional space for migratory birds, it turns out. My parents have, for the last 2 years, had a couple of, I think they're called blue neck pigeons, who have been nesting on their balcony. And like when we were there over Christmas, it was fascinating. Like we would all like get up on the balcony really quietly and watch, you know, these eggs open. And of course, our daughter loved it. It was really fascinating. And my mother constantly now sends these endless photographs and videos of the updates of what the birds are doing.
Beautiful.
On the balcony. And actually, I don't know if you have seen Christoph Keller's piece in Die Balkone.
Yeah.
But he was referring to this non-human agent balconies, exactly the birds and the pigeons that have been nesting in a kind of a facade of the building. Not really, they constructed their own balcony. But his piece was pointing out,
they cut it out and then they kind of nested the starlings, the babies inside.
And Tom and Eva had their crows.
Yeah, exactly. They had also the plastic crows. Yeah.
So I have to say, like, the crows are a very, I mean, at least also for my balcony, they are such a strong, they're one of the strong residents in the neighborhood. And then they are really super big. And they, because once in a time, for example, in our balcony, the pots were empty and the flower pots they started to use as the food place, and it started to smell really very heavy and bad. But they were always coming and going, and at some point I decided to clean it. And the crow came to the window, he looked at me and he shouted at me. He was complaining. He was like, wow, 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 wow. And I'm like, sorry. But yeah, I think Tom and Eva's piece, probably they are also referring back to crows. And actually in our neighborhood, then I realized a lot of balconies, they have this plastic crows too, as a protection for these big crows, because they are really like, they are majestic and they are very dominant in the neighborhood. Yes.
When the ruling relaxed that you could see another family, we went over and all the crows were in a giant bin in the entrance, and it was so surreal and sinister.
Yeah, there is.
And Sam, could you tell us about how actually, and we were so grateful and happy about this, how you took over the project somehow and did another version of the Balkone with your students?
Yeah, we just started meeting through video conferencing with the students. I'm teaching in Hamburg at the art school in Hamburg, and our first meeting all together in the Zoom world, everyone was so kind of depressed and struggling, and I just unmotivated. I said, what have you guys been working on? What are you doing? Show me what you're doing. And nobody's really doing anything. I said, all right, we have to do an exhibition next week. And I told them about Die Balkone in Prenzlauberg, and some of them had already heard about it because it got such good press. So I said, look, Övül and Johanna called me and they said, you have to do this thing. We're doing it next week. Come on. And it was I felt the same way. I was just totally, depressed and not doing anything. And it helped me. It was such a great experience doing it. It was just really energizing and positive, and the whole experience was really wonderful. And so I thought we have to do that in Hamburg. And so then I spent 2 weeks, sending them emails and calling them and texting them. Chasing them like you guys were chasing us. And so I did the same thing. And actually now we have, I think almost 20 of the students have done projects around the buildings of the art school outside and some inside. And then some of the students are, quarantined in different places. So one person is in Istanbul, one is in Colorado, another is in Bogota, and they're even doing things there and then sharing them using social media. So it's fantastic, and they love it. They're really happy.
I guess it's really great, really great to hear it. And I guess what it is that somehow this experiment offered is exactly to offer life out of Zoom, that offer some kind of publicness and analog experience, that Zoom is not the dead end. It's just a tool for us to actually report on our physical and bodily production and encounter. Yeah. And that's why we also think, we are so happy it somehow continues as a snowball effect by itself, because it was almost, the whole project was, of course, we started the conversation, but it happened by itself, Exactly. Everyone installed everything on their own. And maybe I'm also thinking why it was that, and maybe one of the reasons next to this de-Zoomification was also that it's like kind of trying to find a freedom within the confinement. There are rules of confinement, but as artists or as curators, we actually, very often read in curatorial statements, yes, art can recontextualize the world, art can change our point of view. And somehow in this machine, it was happening. And that's why we stepped into it quickly. That's, how I felt about it. And it's so great to see it goes further and further.
I also really loved the fact that we constantly talk about how things have to be sustainable, and then we also struggle about fundraising and budgets. And I really actually love the fact that it was truly sustainable. It was truly, which is actually, I think, the foundation of conceptual art. This kind of sustainability and freedom and independence.
Well, I was also thinking, it came out of necessity.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us that participated in it recognized the necessity. We have to do it ourselves. And actually, I mean, I've had that experience quite a lot. If working in, maybe you guys have too, working in countries that don't have an strong economic base, that aren't wealthy, that don't put a lot of money into arts and culture. It's the artists and the curators and the writers and the intellectuals. They just do it themselves. And I think this had that same kind of energy. I mean, I participated in many things in Mexico and Tijuana and Mexico City, which were very artist run, and no resources. Everyone does it themselves. And there's a real energy to working that way, I think.
I did a show in Guadalajara once with a solo show with a $200 budget. And it was one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Yeah, you can do great things that way. Because it's a necessity. You have to do it. You have no choice.
Well, yeah, of course, we have to say, Berlin is a place that was very generous and quickly reacting to artists and curators. So it might be different for people who all the time work in that conditions. Maybe, they don't feel such an urgency. But we are in the privileged place when it comes to founding. It has to be said, that Berlin reacted. Therefore, we also kind of reacted. That was coming together.
But it also kind of made me think this was also something that I spoke with my students in Braunschweig, that the privileged art scenes and cultural scenes, and mostly they are not reacting, or mostly they are really like kind of using this comfort zone to the end, and like not actually trying to create other structures and other bondings. And this is also it's kind of an issue of the political subjectivity as well. They also don't need the field to protest, because they are in this kind of very protected space. So there was a very interesting relation. One of my students really like kind of constructed also in between, and it made me think. And actually, like at the same time, of course, like the funding structures are very important and very like kind of helpful and needed for different communities to flourish. But at the same time, it also brings a different sort of, I would say, maybe laziness for the scene, like in terms of finding their own solutions and responses to the problems, because there's always like a structure, giving an answer on behalf of them, or there is this kind of a protection mechanism. And then actually, of course, in many strong art scenes, actually, it's a community-based practice, and it's it's also inspiring. So we can also, of course, we are in a luxurious position here where we can balance our work with, let's say, more established institutions who can pay well, and like with like communities who are there really for the art, and we can contribute to it, so that we can in a way kind of balance that kind of these worlds and play a bridge also in between. Because most of the times, at least that kind of as my experience goes, these scenes, these communities where things are done like by the people themselves with their own responsibilities are of course very enriching and nourishing experiences also for other ideas to develop.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
this is kind of just sorry, like I kind of had this monologue.
No, it's true.
You know, I last year I took a group of students from Hamburg and we visited the art school in Ghana at the university in Kumasi in Ghana, and we spent about 2 weeks there. It was amazing. You know, what you know, they don't have studios. They use abandoned buildings. There's no, in the art department, there's no toilet. They have to walk across campus to use the toilet. They don't have running water. They only have electricity a few hours a day. And yet they do these incredible projects. And they work in the whole city of Kumasi. And then they go to Accra and do huge exhibitions. And that was incredibly inspiring for us. You know, and the adversity that the students and the faculty face every day there, everyday life is a struggle to survive, and yet they do just mind-boggling work. And you know, I think for me, like having that experience last year and seeing the incredible things people did with really nothing was also like in mind as we were doing this Die Balkone exhibition, because that energy that they had and the connection with each other, the only real capital that they have in Ghana is each other, is human capital and their own energy. And that's what they have, and they do incredible things with it. And so I felt a little bit of that with your project and the connection with all the people in Prenzlauer, because in a way we're all kind of in the same boat of having all these limitations.
Yeah.
And that gives us strength to come together and try and get, you know, do something within these limitations. So yeah, it's a very empowering feeling.
It's actually, I think, like if we come back to these Bruno Latour questions, what to come, what to continue with, what to leave behind. But I think one of the important things like that I learned also in this process, thanks to our experience all together, is actually like building more instances together like that. To really take our own space and create our own creative autonomy, let's say, maybe more often, and to really also kind of strengthen the ties among us, because of course the system by itself in general, like the sovereign, of course, asks us only to be like the loyal consumers, you know, without voices and without hands, and only with credit card and an address point, you know, on Google Map that can be readable. So to be able to go beyond it, I think it also depends more on us to be able to respond on time and as much as it can to really like create our own solid stance. Also in the face of this kind of really dirty, ambivalent political sphere that, you know, we are trying to survive in.
Yeah, of course, you know, I should say the reason we were able to go to Ghana is because of the wealth of the state of Hamburg and their generosity to pay for our trip. So yeah, I mean, this for sure, the economic factors are very important, you know, and as Joanna said, of course, Berlin has been, you know,
been very lucky, yeah.
Yeah, very lucky here.
And we probably all applied for that amazing grant. By the way, I have to say, I just realized that there's 2 taps right behind us.
Yes, it's true. I just realized also I was looking at them.
Composition is very nice, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but guys, I think we will slowly come to an end. And just to say again, really how grateful we are for your participation, and also for you know, realizing that actually in those times maybe it's a good time to think of public, like a meaningful public art, and how public art, what public art can offer, because we don't know how long this condition will be. You know, it might not end in July, August, or December. So perhaps actually this delegated form of an encounter and sending signs to each other, smoke to each other, can offer, you know, bringing some joy and hope and other feelings that we need as human beings, as artists and as curators, etc. So hopefully we will continue working as neighbors.
I have to add one small thing. One of our quarantine projects with our daughter, we have a 10-year-old, so you know, you have to keep busy. We've been making a model of our dream house. So she made drawings, and then we've been building it. And after the Die Balkone experience, Divna said, "But we have to have a balcony."
Yeah, we built a balcony.
So,
a tropical one.
Yeah, I hope we don't have to actually build this house.
The best ones are unrealized.
Yes. Well, thank you guys both so much for organizing it.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and see you for our opening in the park one day.
One day.
Yes. Hopefully, maybe in a month. Hopefully, we can.
Okay.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Have a very nice day. Ciao. Thank you
Bye-bye.
again.
Ciao.